It all began on a cold November night when David met Emily at a local bar. She was captivating, with a smile that seemed to light up the entire room. They talked for hours, discovering common interests and shared dreams. To David, it felt like destiny. Emily moved into his life like a whisper, soft and unassuming, and before he knew it, they were inseparable. A few months into their relationship, Emily began to change. It started with little things. She would rearrange his belongings, insisting they were in the wrong place. She became increasingly possessive, wanting to know where he was and who he was with at all times. Whenever David tried to question her behavior, she would deflect with charm and laughter, making him feel guilty for even asking. One night, after an argument about his female co-worker, David woke up to find Emily standing over him, her eyes cold and distant. She whispered that she could never lose him, and he felt a chill run down his spine. He decided to brush it off as a bad dream, but the unease lingered. David decided to break things off with Emily. He needed space, needed to breathe. But Emily didn't take it well. She cried, begged, and finally, when he remained firm, she vanished. For a few days, David felt a sense of relief. He could finally move on. But Emily's disappearance was short-lived. Friends started to report seeing her in places where David frequented. She would be at the coffee shop he visited every morning, sitting in a corner, watching. She would be at the grocery store just a few aisles away. David's co-workers mentioned seeing her in the parking lot, staring at his car. She never approached him, never tried to contact him directly, but her presence was everywhere. David's life turned into a nightmare. He received anonymous letters, written in Emily's handwriting, filled with disturbing messages. "You can't hide from me," one read. "We are meant to be together forever," said another. Every night, he would hear scratching noises at his windows and doors, but when he checked, no one was there. He contacted the police, but without concrete evidence, they could do nothing. He even moved to a new apartment, hoping to escape her haunting presence. For a while, it worked. He started to feel safe again, believing Emily had finally let go. Months passed, and David began to rebuild his life. He met a new woman, Sarah, who brought joy and stability back into his world. They quickly grew close, and David began to think that he might have a future with her. But one night, everything changed. Sarah didn't show up for their planned date. When David called, her phone went straight to voicemail. Panic set in, and he drove to her apartment, only to find the door ajar and the place in disarray. On the living room wall, written in what looked like blood, was a message. She was in the way. David's heart pounded as he searched the apartment, but Sarah was nowhere to be found. He called the police, who launched a full investigation. Days turned into weeks with no sign of Sarah. David was consumed by guilt and fear, knowing deep down that Emily was behind this. Desperate and broken, David decided to take matters into his own hands. He started digging into Emily's past, discovering a trail of ex-boyfriends who had experienced similar terror before Emily disappeared from their lives. None of them had seen her since, and David feared he might be next. One stormy night, as David sat in his darkened apartment, he heard a noise from the kitchen. He grabbed a kitchen knife and cautiously approached. There, in the dim light, stood Emily, her eyes wild and her face twisted in a maniacal grin. "Why can't you see?" she whispered. "We belong together." David, fueled by rage and fear, confronted her, demanding to know where Sarah was. Emily's laugh was cold and hollow. "She's gone, David, just like the others. But now, we can finally be together." In a desperate struggle, David managed to overpower Emily, pinning her to the ground until the police arrived. They took her away, her eyes never leaving his, filled with a promise of vengeance. Emily was committed to a psychiatric institution, deemed too unstable for prison. Sarah was never found, and David's grief was insurmountable. He moved to a new city, trying to escape the memories, but Emily's shadow remained. Every now and then, David would receive a letter postmarked from the institution, filled with Emily's ramblings about their eternal bond. He knew she was locked away, but the fear that she would find a way to return never left him. In the end, David learned that some nightmares never truly end. They live on, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the moment when you least expect it. And he knew that somewhere in the recesses of Emily's fractured mind, she was still watching, waiting for the day she could come back into his life. When I was a junior in high school, I had my first relationship. His name was Mike, and he was a senior at a different high school in the next town over. We met through Facebook when he messaged me, and we started talking from there. We began hanging out, going to each other's games. I'd go to his football games, and he'd come to my softball games. After a few weeks, we officially became boyfriend and girlfriend. Since we were in high school, we didn't go on many traditional dates like dinner or drinks. We were just kids, after all. Our dates usually consisted of getting burritos, going for drives, or hanging out at his place since my parents were always home, and made it awkward in case we wanted to do anything. Mike was a bit of a hothead. He was big for a 17-year-old, which is why he played football, but he didn't hang out with the jocks. He spent more time with the stoner crowd and the regular crowd. At least that's what he told me. I didn't go to the same school as him, so I didn't see who he was with during lunch. I also didn't really meet many of his friends. We mostly hung out just the two of us instead of in group settings. Since Mike lived kind of far away and I couldn't drive yet, it did get annoying. Truthfully, I started to develop feelings for a boy named Andrew at my own school who was in my grade. Around the same time, I felt myself losing interest in Mike. I wanted to test things out with Andrew, so one night when Mike asked to hang out, I requested he pick me up so we could talk. He knew right away something was off when I said that. When he picked me up, we went for a drive, and I told him that I think we should take a break. He refused to accept that I was serious and angrily demanded to know what he did wrong. When I told him it was just that I felt the spark wasn't there anymore, he got so mad that he punched his dashboard, leaving a big indent in it. He started yelling and scaring me, so I was about to get out of the car, but he stopped me and put his hand on my shoulder saying, "No, no, no," and then asked me not to leave. He told me he was just angry and that he'd drive me home. As we drove, he kept getting angrier, asking for more details about what he did wrong. He started blowing through stop signs, and that's when I realized we weren't going in the direction of my parents' house. I asked him to pull over and let me out, and he yelled, "No!" We were approaching a wooded area, and that's when I started getting really scared. I had never seen him like this before. He was showing me a crazy side of himself. When he stopped the car on the side of a quiet road, I got out. He yelled for me to come back, but I didn't. My mom came to pick me up. Mike sent me an apology text later that night, but I didn't respond. 2 nights later, I left my house to walk to Andrew's place, who lived only 2 blocks away from me. On my way there, I spotted someone across the street, not too far behind me, walking about the same pace as me. They were wearing a hoodie with the hood up, and I couldn't see their face. Foot traffic on our block wasn't too common, but it also wasn't super weird either. The closer I got to Andrew's house, the closer the person across the street got. As I continued up the street, I turned again and saw the person was now on the same side of the street as me. My heart started to race. I started walking faster and texted Andrew to come outside because I thought I was being followed. He replied, "Okay." I turned one more time as I heard the sound of shoes running on the sidewalk approaching from behind me. I saw the guy in the black hoodie running at me. I screamed and ran as fast as I could for about 5 seconds before seeing Andrew run to the front of his house in confusion. I turned around again and saw the guy in black running in the opposite direction down the street. I keep saying the guy in black, but I know it was Mike. The guy had an identical height to him from what I could tell. A few instances happened after that, like getting calls with no caller ID and seeing Mike's car parked outside my parents' house in the middle of the night. My parents were aware of what was going on. One day, my dad drove us over to Mike's house and knocked on the front door while I was in the car. He had a long, loud talk with Mike's parents. I lowered the windows to listen, and most notably, my dad yelled that he doesn't care how old Mike is, that it's still harassment, and if he keeps trying to contact me in any way, we'd get the police involved. It worked. Mike stopped trying to contact me after that. For those wondering, Andrew and I ended up dating for around a year. My relationship with Mike was an early lesson in my life to watch out for red flags. Almost a decade ago, while attending college in Florida, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but given the various calls I received from professors and classmates, I nervously picked up, hoping for good news. However, the moment I heard her voice, my heart sank. It was my ex-girlfriend, someone I hadn't spoken to since our breakup 6 months prior. I wondered how she had obtained my new number, as I had intentionally kept it from her. She insisted that we needed to talk urgently, and despite my reservations, I agreed to listen. The anticipation made my heart race as I sat down on my bed, preparing myself for the worst. But instead of what I expected, a pregnancy announcement or some other personal bombshell, she dropped a devastating blow. There had been a car accident, and my mother, who worked as an emergency room nurse, was one of the casualties. In shock, I tried calling my ex's cell, hoping for more information, but she didn't answer. In a panic, I called my little brother to share the news, and we both broke down in tears. As we mourned together, my brother suddenly shouted, "Mom!" In a surreal twist, she walked through the door, utterly confused by our distress. It turned out that my ex had fabricated the entire story, intending to hurt me in the worst way possible, just as she felt I had hurt her. It's true, I had cheated on her during college, a mistake I deeply regretted and had owned up to when she ended our relationship. While I may have deserved some form of retribution, her cruel deception went beyond anything I could have imagined. Ex-boyfriends can certainly be difficult, but as I learned firsthand, some ex-girlfriends can be equally ruthless.